button, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. So I'm actually just for our purposes, I'm just going to repeat that so we have that this particular slide on the screen. So again, my apologies for repeating this. I just want to make sure that those who may access this recording later hear this information. But again, to lay the framework for our discussion today, the Housing and Neighborhood Development Department worked with an outside consultant, HRNA, to develop a 10-year affordable housing plan that we call Housing GSO. And this is really what drives our decision-making with future funding sources and how we want to implement or think we should implement the funding to increase housing. The City Council adopted and approved the plan on October the 20th, 2020, and implementation began in early 2020. So the 4 primary goals of the Housing GSO plan is 1, increasing and preserving affordable rental units. In addition, we want to reinvest in our neighborhoods by repairing and rehabbing or developing existing affordable housing in our community. 3, we want to provide assistance to our residents to access affordable home ownership. And then lastly, we want to provide additional supportive housing by creating more units and also providing short-term rental assistance to households who qualify. I think many of you who are on this call are probably aware that COVID certainly exacerbated the need for short-term rental assistance. And so in providing that through additional supportive housing and supporting those folks, we certainly, the pandemic amplified that need in our community for sure. So what is HOME-ARP and why are you here today? HOME-ARP is a program that where Congress appropriated $5 billion through American Rescue Plan Fund. ARP is short for that, to the existing Home Investment Partnerships Program, or HOME for short, to provide homelessness assistance and services to qualifying populations. And I'll get to what qualifying populations are on a later slide, but basically these funds were appropriated specifically to be administered through our existing HOME program to provide these services and homelessness assistance. The City of Greensboro's allocation is just over $6.6 million. These funds will be used to leverage with other public and private dollars to create more units and provide additional services to a population that's in need. Funds must be expended by September 30, 2030. So we do have a little bit of time to get the funds out and get them in the community. So I talked about qualifying populations. Those individuals who are eligible to receive these benefits include largely homeless individuals or families, or those who are at risk of homelessness. We have various subpopulations that fall within those 2 groups. And of course, we've listed some of those. So individuals or families who are fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, or other issues like that, our veterans in our community, and any of our families that are experiencing housing instability. So we talked about other populations, and without these services, how would we help to prevent a family's homelessness or help target those who are at the greatest risk of homelessness? So it's really those 2 buckets when you're thinking about it, those experiencing homelessness and those that are at the highest risk and experiencing housing instability. Eligible activities through HOME-ARP include production and preservation of affordable housing, tenant-based rental assistance, or TBRA for short, supportive services, homeless prevention services, and housing counseling, and lastly, purchase and development of non-congregate shelters. So in developing our HOME-ARP plan, we looked at several different data sets to help guide and build the foundation to show the need in our community and how we wanted to invest these dollars. We used what's called the point in time count data, or the PIT count. And so that's an annual count that we do where we literally go and count the homeless individuals on the street or in our shelter system one time a year to try to capture or have an idea of how many people that are truly experiencing homelessness in our community. We also looked at the housing inventory count, or the HIC, what we call HIC for short. This is the number of units that are available or beds that are available in our community that we can actually place people experiencing homelessness into and what's available. And then lastly, in collaboration with Guilford County, luckily at the same time, they were doing a gaps analysis that's still in draft form, so it's not fully adopted yet. But we used the information from that, gleaned from service providers in the community, as well as individuals who, with lived experience or expertise, who can tell us and give us insight into their experience using the system here in Guilford County, and can certainly speak to that. So those are the three primary sources we use to really build the foundation for our HOME-ARP. This is just a general chart and the report out of our PIT count data for 2022. So again, the point in time count again is held in the beginning of the year every year. It is meant to be a snapshot of at any given point on any night how many people are experiencing homelessness. And so in 2022, 426 individuals were experiencing homelessness on the night of the count. We include individuals who are both sheltered and unsheltered to help determine, who is using the bed utilization, as well as those folks who are staying on the street, who are living in homeless encampments, things like that. So this really helped to drive the work that we're doing and the decision making around how to use these dollars appropriately. Additionally, I mentioned the HIC report. That's the housing inventory count. You can see here our COC is comprised of the entirety of Guilford County, City of Greensboro, and City of High Point. And so this is able to tell us how many beds are available year round for any individual or family that ends up becoming homeless during that time. So this is really, again, giving us insight into what's available and where the gap is in order to use these funds to meet the need. So in our HOME-ARP planning, we consulted with the Corporation for Supportive Housing. They came in and led and facilitated a day with our service providers and individuals with lived experience. And these were the main questions that we asked. We really wanted to target one, obviously identifying the two populations we're trying to serve, but what's missing? Where are the gaps in services? Where's the gaps in housing, and how can we meet those needs? And so we had all of our service providers represented in that meeting. A total of 14 attended and were able to speak to these questions to give us feedback. And then in addition to that, both in-person and off-site interviews with people with lived experience were able to also answer these questions and talk about what they experienced as they went through the process and eventually became. In addition to that particular meeting, we sent out a survey to individuals, including these questions. So if they didn't share everything that they wanted to share in that particular meeting, that they could then elaborate and add more information for us to, again, incorporate into the plan. And then we met separately with executive director leadership, again, walking through these questions to really build the foundation and really, have a robust plan that includes all types of feedback from different groups that serve this population. So this is our draft allocation plan. This will give you an idea of where we have determined funding should go with the HOME-ARP funds. You'll also see percentages there, so it gives you an idea of how much of the allocation is going to what. We plan on putting $2.5 million into supportive services, $1.5 million to tenant-based rental assistance, or TBRA for short, $2.3 million to affordable rental housing, And additionally, we have a small allocation for admin and planning of the grant. So included in that is our partnership with Corporation for Supportive Housing. And we can come back to this screen at a later time. So now is the opportunity for those of you who are on the call. We'd love to hear your ideas, your comments. If you have questions, again, this was a very, very general overview, high-level overview of HOME-ARP, the intent of the funds, and how we determined to use them in the community to meet the need. But we want to hear from you, and so we value your feedback. And I want to open it up to others to, again, start asking questions or provide ideas and comments. We take your feedback and we do incorporate that also into the plan. So I'm going to open the floor up to others. And in fact, it might even be helpful to put the questions back up on the screen that we asked our service providers and stakeholders in the community as a way to drive and start this conversation.
So since we have a small number of attendees, I think it would be okay if we didn't do the raise hand and maybe just allow the participants to take themselves off mute and voice their input.
Certainly, and I'll jumpstart us. So just posing this question to those who are on the call, what are the gaps that you as a resident and a community member see in our shelter housing system? What do we need more of? And in this, through your own personal experience, you know, where are we lacking and where can we grow? And I'll monitor the chat as well.
Hi, this is Betty Jenkins. How are you doing?
Well, thank you.
Well, I think I'll just kick us off real quick. As far as your first question is concerned, of course, we know there's a lack of housing. But speaking as far as the school system is concerned, we have a problem with our kids being transported or getting approval to be transported to the school. And that is a school of origin. And sometimes the parents choose to go to the school in the district. It takes our district 30 days to approve a child for bus transportation, which is absolutely horrible. So if we had some type of mechanism for whether it's a van or some type of travel device that we can get our kids to school quicker, that would help the school system out and would tremendously help the students out and the families. So that is one of the gaps that I see, well, too, as far as housing and transportation.
So to just repeat back what I heard, you see a huge gap when it comes to transportation and that support service in order to make sure there's no gap in
Education service
with the education that a child is receiving. So bus transportation or any transportation, as we see kids who tend to be transient, move around quite a bit, and we don't want to remove them from their school of origin. Rather, we'd like to keep them without interrupting their education by providing that transportation. Okay.
Yeah, but we do have some families that decline the school of origin. So, so it's their right, it's their choice. But those are some of the gaps that I see, along with after school programs when a child can stay after school, whether it's at their school or whether it is going to the Y. I'm using Y for an example. A child can receive more services, tutoring at the Y or tutoring at the school, but need transportation to that site and also need transportation from that site to their home or where they're living.
Okay.
And I'll stop right there.
No need to stop. This is your time and we want to hear your feedback. So, and thank you.
We'll be here for 2 hours, okay?
Well, and I appreciate you getting us jump started as well. So yes, I hear you, and those are two very valid gaps that we have heard also from our service providers. So we've heard that, and thank you for kind of building and lifting that up in this conversation. Thank you. Is there anyone else that wants to talk about gaps that they're seeing in our community, again, related to those who are experiencing homelessness or at greatest risk of homelessness? So are there gaps in, our housing, our services system, shelter system, whatever it may be?
Good afternoon. My name is Marguerite. I wanted to ask, the population that we serve has limited income, and due to the increase in the rates for rental properties, it has caused a challenge for many of our families to continue to be able to afford the rent at some of the places. And I noticed that there's going to be some funds allocated for rental assistance. I guess it's a two-part question. One question would be accessing the funds for the rental assistance. Would that be requested through the city of Greensboro, or will you be working with local organizations like Greensboro Housing Coalition, Greensboro Urban Ministry, Salvation Army? And the second part to the question would be, will it be a one-time rental assistance? Like you may assist only once within a 12-month period, or will it be ongoing to make up the difference? And when I say difference, meaning, say for instance, we have a client whose rent was $600 and the landlord increased it to $750. So now the tenant has to make up $150 a month. And by them have limited income, that's causing a burden. So would your program be able to offer like a supplement and pay that difference ongoing for the family? Or will it be like a one-time, 1-month assistance and you're not eligible for a certain period of time to reapply?
Those are great questions, and I appreciate that, Marguerite. And just really quickly, Esther, I see your hand, and I see a couple of questions in the chat, so I'll get to those in just a second. To answer your first question about accessing the funds, we haven't developed, so currently in this planning stage, we just know that we, with these dollars, want to provide this service in the community. And another driving factor behind this was, if you're familiar with the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, those were funds that both City of Greensboro and Guilford County received through the Treasury Department to implement and provide the rental assistance that you're speaking of. So we haven't, to answer your most direct question, we haven't built out the parameters of the particular program. Your feedback is excellent, obviously, because we can think about some of the things that you mentioned and what's going to really create housing stability. That's our goal here. We want to make sure the folks that we serve truly get to a place of housing stability. I think the general idea in mind, Marguerite, is to have potentially for an eligible or qualifying population to have multiple months of rental assistance to help support them and create that stability that they need. When I mentioned the ERAP program, we administered that through our partner agencies. So we had several: GHC, Salvation Army, Greensboro Urban Ministry, and Housing Consultants Group. And so we were able to do it that way effectively. We've also administered some directly through the city. So both have worked and been successful. More than likely, we'll probably lean on the expertise of our service provider partners to implement that program. But again, those details just haven't been worked out. So we certainly welcome and thank you for that feedback. I don't think it's going to be a one and done type of service. It's most definitely going to be something that we need to think through and really build on what support is there to, one, create housing stability, and then ensure that that family can continue paying their rent moving forward once we remove the assistance. So I think I answered both of your two-parter. We haven't decided yet, but I'm leaning towards we will most likely use our service providers. And then part two, it won't be a one-time rental assistance, so say 1 month of assistance. It may be multiple months of assistance to create the stability that they need. But within a 12-month period, yes, we'll have to look at serving as many families as we can in an effective, efficient way. So I hope I answered your questions to the best of the ability, knowing that we're just at the top level right now and haven't get to the granular details of the particular activity of TBRA.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Welcome. I'm going to go to Esther next. I saw her hand up.
Thank you. I have 2 questions as well. So first of all, I haven't read the draft, so sorry if I ask a question that may have answer in there. But how do you effectively identify at-risk homeless through domestic violence? I mean, it will be easier to identify at least at risk of homeless through financial burden. It's much easier to identify. But with domestic violence, that's the big question for me. And also the gap. Have you thought about supportive service in terms of mental health for children who will be displaced that way? That's gonna be something we think about and set aside. My next point will be, what communication channel are you planning to use to get the news to the population you will be serving? So I remember as we were canvassing back through COVID, many residents didn't know they could have utility services. They could have this. So we basically make a sheet with the addresses, who to contact, phone number. Many that have no clue that those services existed. So it will be another really we should think about how to reach them, because one thing is the service are available, but another thing is people know about and apply for it. Thank you.
Yeah, these are great questions. Thank you, Esther. I'm going to kind of combine the DV question and then the mental health services for children into one, just to collapse them into support services. But we work very closely with, so if you all are not familiar with the Guilford County Continuum of Care, we partner, they are pretty much every service provider in Guilford County that provides services to individuals experiencing homelessness or at risk of experiencing homelessness. It's every service provider in this continuum. And so we work very closely with them. In fact, Family Services of the Piedmont is one of our key partners. It's a city-funded agency that works directly with individuals experiencing or fleeing domestic violence, dating violence, human trafficking, things like that. And so we have incorporated, we receive direct feedback from them about how to incorporate these services and what's needed. And so certainly they will be heavily involved or will be involved in some way to ensure that we can target, or at least are getting access to those folks who meet that subpopulation definition to get access to these services. And the same with children who are in need of mental health services as well. In partnership with Guilford County and the mental health services they provide, close partnerships with the school system. Again, the funds used for support services will really help to streamline that process and to target specifically those needs that are unmet. So that's the intent with those support services. That's a great question. Your third question was in terms of communication and how we're going to get the message out. We do that in a litany of ways. One, we post everything on our city website. We post it through all of our social media outlets, so both our department Facebook page as well as the city's Facebook page, etc. We have flyers that we send out to all of our service providers. They have a COC newsletter. We post it in the paper. So there's just, if you read the draft plan, we talk about all the different ways that we advertise things to get the message out. But certainly would love to work closely with your group and other groups to make sure that as you're canvassing, if it's a flyer that can say, here's the availability of funds and where you can go to access them or how you can access them. I think it would be a great opportunity to work closely with neighborhood groups to make sure that message is getting out to folks who may not read the newspaper, who may not look at social media. We can definitely look at that and value that feedback.
And Liz, I just want to say as well, the department is developing a community contact list, which will have names and emails. Like, for example, if you're attending this, if you would drop your email address in the chat, we'll make sure that you're included on that contact list that's being established for the department.
Thank you, Anika. I see Ms. Jenkins has her hand up.
Yes, it was a question in the chat from Caitlin, and I think Letitia maybe was kind of unclear on what I was stating. So I'll just re-emphasize that and see if they have any further questions. And what was stated was that if we had vehicles, we can get the kids to school much quicker than the 30 days that the district or this bus transportation is saying that they can accommodate the kids. We do get them as soon as we can, but I do understand the McKinney-Vento, and I'm sure that Mrs. Paler, who is the coordinator or the director of homeless with the Gifford County Schools, also understand. But in our transportation department, we have several openings, like in other departments in Gifford County Schools. So when you are working on a shoestring employment, I guess they're doing the best that they can, but we do try to get the kids there as soon as possible. But what they have mentioned to Ms. Paler was it would be around 30 days. So just want to entertain any other question that Kaylin or Tisha may have.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Yep. And we work closely with Ms. Paler with families and services, and really try to connect with her anytime we encounter a family that needs that service as well. So what I hear is really that 30-day gap is in transportation is where we need to put emphasis and focus on to make sure that there's no interruption in the education of that child.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Sutton, I see your hand up.
Yes, hi. My day job involves work where people will call sometimes seeking emergency housing. And it's been a struggle. I mean, we've used the shelters. We're very much involved with the COC, and I'm acclimated to the community. I've lived here for many years now, since college. What my interest was this year, I saw what happened with the pop-up shelters, Doorway Project, which I actually was glad to see some type of an effort to add something to the equation that had not been there before. I know what we've done in the past with the Regency. My question this year is like, what happens now in March? Because this is what we're hearing, although we were able to sort of put a Band-Aid on some of our most pressing individuals' needs throughout the winter. What happens in March? That was one question. And then I had two other things. I don't know if you want me to string it all together.
Well, I'll start with the transition plan that we have in place and are implementing. So it's wonderful to hear folks know about Regency and the Doorway Project with the pilot shelters and things like that. We are in process of developing and implementing our transition plan. So it's really a two-parter. It's the demobilization of the pilot shelters itself, what that looks like and how it affects the residents there. And then the next step of where do they go from there? Because we don't want to put them back into homelessness or put them back on the street. While we have them and can stay connected, the plan is to put them into other programs that are available for housing. So we invest a lot of our dollars in rapid rehousing, where we immediately use the housing first principle. We get them into housing where we deal with the barriers that they may be experiencing at a later date, because housing comes first. And so Rapid would help to get them into a permanent unit, provide those wraparound services, and provide the rental assistance they need for a period of time to get them stabilized. We also have funds available for hotel assistance. And so that's been really a gap filler for us the last 3 years because of the pandemic. You know, where are we going to shelter people to protect them from COVID, prevent COVID, all of those things. And so we have hotel assistance still available for those purposes. And so we do plan to exit some of the folks into additional hotels when we close those programs. We also work closely with the COC partners. If they have available housing specific to, I'll use veterans as an example. The Servant Center stepped up and said, hey, you got any veterans? We can help with the housing piece with those folks. So it's really a collaborative effort, and then also identifying the resources we currently have to ease them into a new housing situation. So we can have more time with them to develop a longer term plan.
Is there a place per se for families? I know with the shelters, I believe with Regency also was individual.
It was, yes. We have partnerships with the Greensboro Urban Ministry, as well as some partnerships with local hotels where we can place families as well. We don't have the way it was set up, the referral system for pilot and winter shelter programs, whereas for individuals, we don't have that formal referral, but amongst our network, we work together to get families housed using hotel assistance. And we do that in partnership also with Ms. Taylor, who's the school social worker for Guilford County Schools. So that's the first plan. We are already planning the transition so that there's no interruption in services to those individuals, nor will they be experiencing homelessness again once they exit that program.
And this is one case in particular, not to get into the weeds, but if there is no income at all, is there still a safety net?
Yes, yep. Most of the folks that we encounter experiencing street homelessness are not working. But part of the services that we provide or agencies provide is to establish an income source. So whether that's gainful employment, or if they have a disability of some sort, do they qualify for SSI or SSDI? We go through that process to help establish that so that they can further sustain housing with income.
The timing for the SSDI, is there a way to magically expedite that? Because I mean, there are people who are eligible possibly for Medicaid or SSDI, but sometimes the approval process takes a while.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the SOAR program. It's implemented primarily through the Servant Center, but different case managers can be trained in it. It's meant to expedite that process for someone experiencing homelessness. But even my understanding is that they're even experiencing long wait times, even when those cases are meant to be expedited. And unfortunately, we're at the whim of social SSA saying, okay, we'll get to it when we get to it. So unfortunately, the method that was created and the best practice created to expedite that is also experiencing, a slowness in getting people approved for that type of thing.
Is there any plan to incentivize private landlords to be involved?
Yes, it's wonderful. That's certainly a gap that's been identified through this process and through the gaps analysis that the Guilford County developed their draft. Landlord incentive certainly helps to get someone who otherwise wouldn't be housed. And so those are things, that methods and best practices that we're looking at, not just as City of Greensboro, but as a community, to say, if we can incentivize these landlords to take our folks, it will help to get them housed a lot more quickly. So that's also something we're looking at as an option to, open up some more opportunities for this particular population, because they're hit the hardest when it comes to affordable rental housing. And landlord incentives has been considered a best practice since the start of the pandemic. We've looked at other communities and how they're implementing it, and certainly have considered doing that here.
Heard some conversation, of course, around affordable housing and diversified housing, different housing types. My, I guess, last concern more or less dealt with that. One is that I've seen a lot of vacant or condemned homes as I'm going about the community. Some of you know me as also not just being a social worker, but being licensed as a real estate broker. So I'm always paying attention to property. And I've had some conversations with people about blighted properties. I recently pulled up the code violation, what I thought was the up-to-date listing, and it seemed pretty out of date. And there were homes that had been sitting for 3 or 4 years to be demolished. I don't know if those homes could be saved or salvaged. It was just, is there someone, I thought it falls to Michelle's department,
which is
to
us.
keep
Yes.
that list up to date?
Um,
Mhm.
I'll have to maybe offline get with you to see where you found your list, because my understanding it is up to date because we are actively demoing houses that are just not habitable or safe for folks to live in. So I'll get with you separately about that offline, and can connect you to the right person. But as for the idea of using vacant or other properties that are just vacant, we are actually looking into that. So it's great that you brought that up. Our department, so you mentioned Michelle Kennedy, she's our department director. And so we've looked at vacant properties or city-owned properties that can be rehabbed and used for other purposes. So we're actively in those conversations.
Oh, I'm sorry, go
No, go
ahead,
ahead. No,
Liz.
go ahead. No, you're
I was
fine.
gonna
Go ahead.
say, I've known of her since the RC days, and at one time, we were involved in some discussions even around the idea of container housing. The smaller tiny homes, which I know we do have a nonprofit in town that is doing great work in that area, so not to take anything away from what's already being done. I think a lot has been done, but everything can't just be multifamily development. Not everyone wants to live in an apartment complex.
Right.
Sometimes it's not conducive. Sometimes because of mental health needs, you just can't be around that many people. I mean, it's not congregant like a shelter, but it's the density, sometimes with the parking and just the stress that it causes from having 100 neighbors in the neighborhood. So, every time I hear container home, and I've had some involvement with that, or tiny homes, and the idea of modular housing, and is manufacturing something that the city would ever consider. And then that is my final comment. I will lower my hand.
These are great converse, and really gets kind of in the bread and butter of what HOME-ARP is trying to do. We want to create, and also our 10-year plan to kind of tie it back to housing GSO. We want to create more affordable housing. We have to begin to think outside of the box in innovative ways, to your point, to say not every type of housing fits every person's needs. So we are, as a team, looking at vacant, condemned, or not. If they're condemned, they have to be fixed, but vacant properties or city-owned property that could be repurposed for new use. Our end goal is really, we want to develop permanent supportive housing. To your point, there are folks we know can't live in a communal setting or a congregate setting like an apartment complex, but based on their mental health needs. And so permanent supportive housing would meet that need. And so these are wonderful suggestions. We are actively looking at that. So you may not hear about it right away, but as we progress further in developing and creating more affordable housing, you'll start to hear those ideas coming up, and us talking about how can we implement those and use those to meet the need as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So,
Nika.
so I will briefly indicate that on March the 16th, we have a information section, a seminar session around community land trust, which is a new initiative that we're considering for the city of Greensboro. So I'd encourage each and every one of you to attend that information session as well. But the logistics of it are still being developed, and we anticipate getting that information out as soon as it's solidified.
Thank you, Anika. Just really quickly, Marguerite, I will actually email you separately about your question in the chat, access to get housing assistance. I want to kind of steer us back to our goal here of this session is to talk about unmet needs and how can these funds be used to meet those needs. So I want to open it back up to any others we haven't heard from, or if you've already talked and you have another idea and you want to expand on that, we'd love to hear from you. But I'm going to kind of bump down to question 3, specifically unmet needs that exist that our current funding isn't addressing, or even the programs that are established just aren't addressing. And again, what gaps in housing in particular are you seeing? You know, just building off of Ms. Sutton's conversation, if there's anything to add to that, we'd love to hear it. Seeing a, didn't mean to do that, you all. Go back to the question.
Liz, I think you've done such an outstanding job in your presentation that in answering the questions, I don't see any hands raised or anyone off mute. I would just like to say that I think for the department's first time doing an information session as a part of our public comment phase for new federal funding, is off to a wonderful start. And we hope this is the start of many exchanging positive and productive exchanges that we will continue to have whenever new funding sources is available.
I want to also open it up to, this is a lot of information, even just the general overview can be a lot thrown at you at once. So we strongly encourage you, if you have additional ideas that pop into your head after you be in this session, Shantae Lewis Fleming is going to be your direct contact to provide that additional feedback too. So her information's up here. I do want to piggyback a little bit off of what Caitlin mentioned earlier in terms of the recording is going to be posted on our webpage. And so we'll include the slides as well. So if you want to go back and listen, or you know other folks who wanted to join but couldn't, this will be available tomorrow for them to listen into should they want to participate in it. So I'll leave this up for just a few minutes, but I think Unica, Anna, or Caitlin, city staff, if there's anything else, Shantae, that I've missed that needs to be emphasized or discussed before we close out, I just want to open that up to you all as well.
For those of you who were able to make it, please share the information with people you meet in the community. Let them know that this is current funding that's been allocated, and we welcome all feedback and look forward to collaborating with each and every one of your contacts that you engage probably on a day-to-day basis.
All right. With not seeing any hands or questions in the chat, I think we'll stop there. Thank you everyone for your valuable input, your participation. We really, really appreciate it. So again, any other questions or comments, you can send those to Shantae. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Okay.